to the Motley Mystic Podcast. I'm your host, Candace Shalhoub. I have named this podcast and Substack the Motley Mystic because I believe truth speaks with many voices. I began my spiritual journey as a Southern Baptist. It was a belief system that was thrust upon me by my family, but I never really bought into the idea that one religion, much less one Christian denomination, had a corner on God or spirituality. I began a deeper journey in my 20s that brought me through Buddhism, Taoism, Sufism, the Christian mystics, into A Course in Miracles, the teachings of Meher Baba, Yogananda, the Bhagavad Gita, and contemporary writers such as Marianne Williamson, Pema Chodron, Jack Kornfield, Michael Singer, Eckhart Tolle, and my gateway guru, Wayne Dyer. He'll have a special place in my heart always. Because when I first heard Wayne Dyer speak, it was like some ancient recognition awoke within me. I didn't know why what he said was true. I just knew that it was. His words and ideas resonated with something really deep inside me. I find those truths in lots of little religious pockets all around me. Dogmas and doctrines have crept in to make religion into a rigid thing about belief, but as a motley mystic, I feel spirituality should be less about belief and more about that deep knowing that we are more than these bodies, more than these thoughts, and definitely far more than any belief or opinion. Indeed, we are all a motley collection of beliefs and ideas, and if that resonates with you, then you could also be a motley mystic. In this podcast, I'll be reading the articles I post on Substack, which I hope you'll subscribe to. It's totally free. It will remain that way. I try to write regularly about spiritual topics and how we can see through this world of illusion to the light not just within ourselves, but within everyone in this world, whether our ego judges them as friend, foe, or stranger. In today's podcast, I'll be reading my essay entitled 3 Steps to Tame the Red Zone Ego. 3 Steps to Tame a Red Zone Ego. Channel your inner Cesar Millan. Famous dog trainer Cesar Millan is used to dealing with what he calls red zone dogs, such as Emily, a pit bull who took her owner out for a daily drag while barking, growling, and lunging at every person and animal that dared cross their path. So-called red zone dogs are easy to spot. They're very territorial, aggressive, overprotective, and they will guard their resources, such as toys or food. I encountered one of those vicious red zone dogs recently, and it did attack me, and it did its level best to do me a lot of harm. The thing is, I know this dog very well, and I'm not surprised that it attacked me. In fact, it's a dog that tears at my tender parts quite regularly. That dog's name is Ego. A Course in Miracles in Chapter 19 says that our egos are a lot like those red zone dogs, because egos are only, quote, capable of suspiciousness at best and viciousness at worst, unquote. Red zone dogs are always suspicious, certain that someone is lurking about trying to steal the resources it believes are scarce in this world, like food or attention or affection. That suspicion can turn to viciousness when its worst fears are confirmed and it senses someone is out to deprive it of what it believes it needs. I think we can learn a lot about how to handle our suspicious and vicious egos from how Caesar handles dogs. First and most importantly, Caesar never sees a dog as hopeless or in need of destruction or elimination. Red zone dogs are that way for a reason, and if you can figure out what it is, spoiler alert, the answer is fear, you can work to eliminate or at least ease the underlying cause. When we're working with our ego, our goal is not to eliminate it. It's not even to overcome it or fix it. Our goal is always to gently oust it as the alpha dog of our lives and make it an obedient part of the pack where it belongs. We need an ego to survive in the world, but it must be in its proper place, dutifully walking beside us instead of snarling and growling at the world. The proper place for both a dog and our ego is as companion, one that obeys us and listens to us, and not the other way around. We can take that first step in training up our ego correctly by recognizing that it constantly lives in fear. It sees the world as completely outside of itself, where it must orchestrate and control its circumstances to feel any peace, love, or joy inside. It views others with suspicion and attacks those it sees as a threat to its bodily safety or limited resources. There's a lot of fear we're all carrying around in our bodies, and like our beloved pets, we tend to feel protective over it. We see a fearful animal and we want to coddle it and give it what we think it needs to feel safe. The thing is, as a Course tells us, just recognizing our fear isn't enough. We also have to allow the Holy Spirit to show us the truth underneath that fear. It's the same for us as it is for dogs. We're afraid that we're separate, that it's a dog-eat-dog world, and that we will be the dog that's for dinner. If, however, we refuse to protect our fear, a Course tells us that God will reinterpret it. God will transform our fear into love by showing us exactly what we need to do to turn our red zone dog of an ego into a faithful and loving companion. It's the same thing Caesar recommends: plenty of exercise, discipline, and affection. It's understandable that we would want to protect our canine-like ego because we often treat our ego like we do our pets, especially red zone pets whose dominance we often mistake for competence. The reason dogs become aggressive is because, according to Caesar, they don't have a true leader. Dogs, by their nature, don't crave domination. They crave a steady hand, someone they can trust to guide and protect them. When they feel such leadership is lacking, they do what they have to do to survive, and that can include becoming vicious. The problem with red zone dogs is that they've had to take care of their own needs and desires for so long that when a leader finally does show up, they resist giving up their viciousness because it's just become a habit. It's become their very identity. And this also happens to us. We all desire a sense of safety, a sense that all of our needs will be met, and a sense of belonging, feeling like we're part of a cohesive whole and not out in the world on our own. When we begin to awaken to that leader within ourselves, that higher divine self, and it begins to assert its proper position, the ego will often react with more suspicion and viciousness. Because it's lived so long in fear, the ego believes that our authentic self is here to destroy it, so it lashes out with even more fury. When this happens, we must follow Caesar's top recommendation for bringing a red zone dog under control: exercise. Now, he, of course, is talking about literal physical exercise, and while that can be a good practice for us as well, what I'm talking about here are the spiritual exercises that we do. Caesar says if he can get the anxiety out of a dog's body by physically tiring them out, then he can work with the mind. The same goes for our ego. If we can alleviate egoic anxiety through exercises such as meditation, journaling, yoga, walks in nature, prayer, or whatever exercise works for you, then we can begin to work with our higher mind to soothe the ego's fear that it will be destroyed or eliminated. If you've ever rescued a dog that's been abused or seen a video of someone who has, you'll see that what removes a dog's suspicion and viciousness the fastest is to allow it some space. Fearful dogs, like fearful egos, do not trust easily. Sometimes all you can do is sit quietly with it and allow it to run amok for a little bit until it just wears itself out. It will try everything it can think of to get you to react how it expects, to yell at it, get frustrated with it, hit it, or otherwise do it harm. It takes time for both your ego and a scared dog to trust you enough to let you pet it, let alone cuddle it and show it some affection. It is ultimately affection, though, that we're working toward. That ability to bring fear to love. That's where discipline comes in. You have to be dedicated to keep working with yourself for any of this to be effective. We must begin, though, where Caesar begins, by training the owner. We may not all own dogs, but we all own an ego, and how it behaves is ultimately up to us. We're not, however, looking to our ego to train our ego. We must go to our inner Caesar, that higher divine self that reinterprets our fear and helps us set those healthy boundaries, rules, and expectations. We can only do that by realizing that the truth of both dogs and humans is this: we are not our fear. As a Course says, fear and love are the only two emotions we can have, and fear is always false. It's not even real, because when we believe that we are in fear, all we are doing is calling for love. We, like dogs, are calling out for our true pack leader to appear so we can enter the peace that we've truly never left. If we stop protecting our fear, It becomes meaningless, as A Course in Miracles tells us. We deny its power over us to conceal the love of God that surrounds us in every moment. This is the wonder of you. You have a universe inside of you that is made only of love. But our fearful egos aren't able to relax and trust that just yet. So we must live fully as our higher divine pack leader, diligently using spiritual exercise to tire out the anxious ego so we can give it the affection it needs to become our faithful companion, rolling over and sitting on command. Ultimately, dogs who are rehabilitated from their red zone status are those who realize in their own canine ways the truth about themselves. They are not meant to be separate. They're meant to be part of a pack that loves and protects them. The same is true of us humans. We are not meant to believe that we are separate. We become like rabid dogs when we believe that we have to fight and scrap for what we perceive as limited resources. The good news is, we are not who or what our egos say we are. We are not limited or worthless, or conversely, we're not our specialness parading around as bravado and bluster. The whole universe is inside of us, which means we are limitless. The only thing we ever have to carry is love, and it is always light. Often, though, we prefer our heavy burdens, our limiting thoughts that keep us caught up in our small stories, thinking we can't possibly be the vastness of all that is. So we allow our egos to tear into us, assuring us with its viciousness that we are nothing unless we prove our worth in some worldly way through power, fame, wealth, or adoration. We protect those limitations by saying things like, I'm working on myself, or I'm trying to overcome my problems, or I'm trying to fix my limitations. Often, the world puts burdens on our shoulders, but the heaviest ones are those we load on ourselves to expect our poor, frightened ego to create a perfect world that doesn't trigger any of its painful wounds. What are you doing to yourself? Give up the heavy burden of your limitations and embrace the wonder of you. The vastness of the universe is inside of you. You are not separate from anything in this world. You are part of the energy that makes the grass grow, the energy that creates mountains and canyons and hurricanes and gentle summer breezes. This is what flows through you at all times, and you're worried about whether someone likes you or not? In Chapter 9 of A Course in Miracles, it tells us that we have two conflicting views about ourselves. We are either our fearful ego, or we are the all that is. They both cannot be true, it says. You cannot evaluate an insane belief system from within it. You can only go beyond it, A Course says. You only go beyond the ego's insane belief system by remembering the true wonder of you, that you are the unlimited vastness of all that is. We can remember who we truly are by using these 3 steps to gain the trust of our red zone ego. We develop spiritual exercises that relieve the ego's anxiety. We dedicate ourselves to those practices, and we cultivate a true affection and open heart for our wounded and fearful ego self. By following these 3 steps, exercise, discipline, and affection for our fearful ego self, we will be transported to that place beyond all fear, beyond all doubt, beyond all limitation, beyond all suspicion, beyond all viciousness. Here, there is nothing to overcome, nothing to fix, nothing to work on in this place out beyond the ego. Here, there is only the featherlight load of love that makes fear meaningless and denies its power to rule over us. Here, you welcome your fearful canine-like ego, and instead of dealing with it or fixing it, you simply make space for it. Here you show it unconditional love and infinite patience. Here, in this place beyond all fear, you become its leader, not its servant. And soon you will find that the ego will sit, beg, roll over, and even play dead at your command. Thanks for listening to the Motley Mystic Podcast. I invite you to click on the link in the show notes and leave a comment on this article. If you want to know more about me, you can go to CandaceChalou.com. That's Candace, spelled the way God intended, Candace, and Chalou, CHELLEW.com. And there you'll find a link to my music and my book, Bulletproof Faith, A Spiritual Survival Guide for Gay and Lesbian Christians. The audio version of that book will be out later this year, so stay tuned. And thanks for listening. you.